SiDEBAR, episode 93, part 1 with Adam Hughes.
Welcome to SiDEBAR, four-color conversations on comics, art, and pop culture, featuring creator interviews and roundtable discussions.
Welcome back, Nation, and thanks for giving us another shot. Today's show is a doozy, and for more reasons than you might think. Our guest is artist and illustrator Adam Hughes, and this episode is part 1 of a two-parter with him. Now, Adam is a man who's very well known for his beautiful rendering of the fair sex, women, females, chicks. For the last 10 years or so, he's mostly been a cover artist on titles like Wonder Woman, Catwoman, Tomb Raider, Vampirella, Rose and Thorn, DC's Imagine series. But go back and check out his great interior work on books like Gen 13, Legionnaires, and of course his famous run on JLA with Giffen and DeMatteis. The man puts it down inside and out. We chatted with him a couple of weeks ago, had a lengthy discussion about all things comics and art, and it was a blast. And dude is hysterical. He had us literally in stitches in between all the regular interview stuff. Topics covered with Adam on this episode, well, we get into his 20-year anniversary in this business, marked by his run on Maze Agency from 1988, his more recent stint as a cover artist, his process, approach, and style, his admission to issues with consistency, plus he answered a couple of really great questions from forum members submitted through our message board. We thank those guys, and of course we thank Mr. Hughes for coming on the show with us. He was awesome. Check back within the week for part 2, and we hope you enjoy. Later.
The pressure's on.
Right.
No. But I mean, man, let's just get right to it then.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Adam, as Dwight and I were preparing to speak with you, we were chatting the other day, and I brought up to him the fact that Maze Agency, the book that you worked on back in the day with Mike Barr, was officially 20 years ago last year, and that was the book where I first fell in love with your work. I mean, did you celebrate that or acknowledge that in any way last year? Or I mean, because 20 years is a feat, dude.
Yeah, I became pretentious. I discovered that, like, for no good reason, I would start throwing the 20-year mark around as a club to, like, sort of like shut people up. Like, somebody tried to sit there and argue with me, I go, well, look, I've been doing this for 20 years, so why don't you shut your hole? And I love to tell, like, because, you know, it's really weird. I turned a weird career corner about 6 years ago, where I went from being a guy that, you know, I don't have 1 million fans, but I have 10,000 amazing fans. Okay. And I've always been very comfortable with that. I don't need, you know, the Jim Lee Nation. I don't need the Alex Ross, Israelites, masses of fans. I like the 10,000 amazing ones that I've got.
Right.
And I've always been happy with that. And they come up and they say, hi, hey, man, love the way you draw boobs. Hey, can I get a drawing? No? Okay. And about 6 years ago, I guess I hit tenure or something, because I became, like, people started to come up and actually showing me respect.
Okay.
And I was like, wait a minute, you know, like, where is this respect coming from? I didn't do anything, you know, suddenly. I didn't do some sort of grand project, Facts from Sarajevo or the Pride of Baghdad. I didn't do something of merit. It's not like all of a sudden the boobs got classier.
Yeah. Well, actually,
I was going to say.
But there's a line that John Huston says in Chinatown, which is one of my favorite movies, and he says, politicians, ugly buildings, and whores all get respect if they last long enough. And
wow.
And it's true. It's like, basically, if you stay around long enough, people will show you some sort of respect just out of a sheer survival thing.
Yeah,
No.
there's something to that. That's true.
Well, now, what do you mean by people weren't showing you respect before?
No, I'm not saying that they weren't showing me respect. It's just all of a sudden I went from being "Hey Adam" to "Hey, Mr. Hughes." Excuse me.
Okay. Okay.
There was an old Homer Simpson line, where Homer said, "Just once I'd like to be called sir without it being followed by you're causing a disturbance." And about 6 years ago, that happened. People started just calling me sir, and I was like, "What the hell?" And I guess when I hit the 20-year career mark, I said, "Oh, cool! I'll use this as a bat and smack people with it."
Right.
But it's weird because consistency is my biggest enemy, and just to sit there and go, "Oh crap! I've been doing this for 20 years." Every day I wait for somebody to knock on the door and go, "Okay, Junior, it's time to grow up. Time to get a real job."
Right.
The party's over. It's like, oh, okay. And hit the. But there's always somebody better. There's always somebody that's taller, better looking, more hair. Last year, Bernie Wrightson celebrated his 40th year as an illustrator.
So his bat is bigger than yours, basically.
What's that?
His bat is bigger than yours, right?
And it's got like scary nails with blood on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like last year he celebrated 40 years as a professional illustrator. Last year I celebrated 40 years as a human.
Right.
It's just, but it is weird to look back and go, holy crap! Wow, 20 years, and sometimes you sit there and go, what do I have to show for it? But as I was cleaning today, I'm finding artwork from, that I drew in the 20th century, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess there is a lot of stuff to show for it.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I adored Maze Agency. I actually went backwards to it. I didn't find it first, but I think I found Justice League first, and then I went back to Maze Agency. I was like, oh wow, okay.
Right.
And you could see the seeds of your beginnings in that book in terms of I guess what you like to draw and what you do well. So
right. I found him in Ghost.
Okay. That was I guess after JLA.
Yeah, definitely.
But Adam, everybody who's followed your work, man, knows you as a former member of one of the first incarnations of Gaijin Studios here in Atlanta. I guess you guys call it Mach 1.
I guess. I would always refer to the studios, the way they refer to Enterprises on Star Trek, or something.
Right.
But no, like I think the first building that we rented, I would jokingly refer to it as the Mark I Gaijin Studios, and then when we moved to another studio, so I going by different buildings that we rented.
Okay.
I think I was in Gaijin's Mark I through Mark IV.
Okay. Well, I'm guessing, prior to you joining Gaijin way back in the day, you were working alone, and then you went to working around others, and now I guess you're kind of back to working alone again, right?
Yeah, when the opportunity came to join a studio with 6 other comic book artists so that we could all cease being troglodytes, and you run the risk of having a really bizarre codependent relationship with your FedEx guy.
Okay.
I was like, oh yeah, I'll work with other artists. This ought to be good because I would hang out with the guys at conventions, and when all the other artists were like, hey, let's go hit the strip clubs, we're like, okay, cool, we're all going back to somebody's room and we're gonna have like a sketch party.
Right.
And it was after like 2 summers of these little sketch parties where we would always end up at the same shows, usually Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said, we ought to do this all the time. And, I was looking for a way to escape from New Jersey, where I was born and raised. So I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And all of us moved down here to Atlanta because Brian Stelfreeze took the point on that particular, project and actually found a rental space. So all of us moved from New Jersey, Alabama, Nevada, Florida. We all sort of came down here, and after about 10 or 12 years, I was like, okay, cool. I've kind of gotten everything I need out of the honeycomb hideout. I'm going to go back to being a hermit, so I can work in my underwear again.
That's hilarious.
There we go.
That's hilarious. I've heard it referred to by many names, but not the honeycomb hideout.
Honeycomb hideout.
Well, that's what we would always refer to it when people would, because everybody at Gaijin was sort of a character, and the ones that are there right now still are. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people would come by and visit. They would just drop by unannounced, and it'd be great if we were all just like in a great goofing around, hey, what do you want to do kind of mood. But if they actually dropped in on a Thursday night when it's about an hour from FedEx, it's like, crap. You know, don't come in here. Like, call first, please. And we actually we used to refer to it in the pejorative. We would say, oh, man, it's like people think this is the fucking honeycomb hideout, and it's not. But, you know, yeah, after a while you go, okay, cool. I mean, you know, do I want to continue to rent an apartment and rent studio space at Gaijin when I'm 40 or 50? And I was like, nah, I don't really want to. I can still be friends with these guys and still see them. But, you know, the main reason why I moved out was so that I could correct all of the financial mistakes I made as a freelancer back during the Maze Agency and Justice League and Ghost.
Okay.
Right.
To get to the point where I could buy a house, because, you know, it's funny. I did a seminar of sorts at SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design, the Savannah campus, and I was supposed to be standing up in front of a projector talking about Photoshop techniques, and I think for about 40 minutes I just handed out tax advice. Because, you know, there's tons of people where you can pick up your favorite artists' work, you can pick up your favorite comic books and glean and learn how to draw from them, but there's nobody to tell you the proper way a freelancer is supposed to pay their taxes.
Right.
And I was behind the 8 ball for most of my career until about 3 or 4 years ago. And I did, you know, and it's just like, you know, it's nightmarish. I mean, you know, you shouldn't be buying your first house when you're 41. You should be buying it when you're 21.
Do you ever miss the camaraderie, man, of being around a bunch of artists? I know you still work closely with a couple of artist friends of yours, but I mean, you know, having the guys around and getting that immediate interaction and that kind of a chemical
reaction.
Yeah.
No. I have become a complete misanthrope. I can't stand people. I actually I like my privacy. I like having my own space, and then I like the idea of, if I want to remind myself that there's 6 billion people in the world, I can go outside my door.
Right. Okay.
And I really couldn't do that at Gaijin.
Okay.
So I don't miss it, and I don't ever sit around and go, yeah, maybe someday I'll join a studio again.
Yeah.
You know, maybe if this whole sort of, you know, respect/tenure thing continues on a positive track, maybe someday I'll kind of pull like a Frank Lloyd Wright kind of a scam and start my own sort of fellowship and have lots of, you know, sort of single-celled assistants. You know, I mean, I remember reading a book about Frank Lloyd Wright, and it was just the greatest scam ever. Is he would get people to, like, be his assistants/students. So he wasn't paying them; they were actually paying him for the privilege to be there. And they were like sharpening pencils and sweeping. And like when he moved out to Arizona, he like built the damn studio. They built the damn studio. They did construction work. Artists were actually hammering their thumbs and nails black, and paying the artist for the privilege to do this. And I was like, that is the best scam ever.
Right.
Go Frank.
So that'll be, if I ever cohabitate with other artists, it'll probably be in a nice, fun, exploitive environment like that.
Like Frank and William Shakespeare. They both have the same kind of cachet.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or Peter Paul Rubens. Didn't he have like a legion of guys touching up his paintings?
Yeah.
Or getting the foundation, and he'd come in and do the touch-ups. So interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, man, I know the last 10 years or so, you've pretty much been exclusively a cover artist, and at DC. If I'm not mistaken, you can correct me if I'm incorrect. But what were your first couple of cover assignments back in the day, and at what point did you realize that fans like were really responding to them, either through sales or just, you know, enthusiasm in their fervor when they saw you?
I became a cover artist by accident. My natural disposition, my natural tendency rather, is I want to do amazing work no matter how long it takes, which is not really conducive to, you know, being an interior artist.
Right.
And after a while, the interior assignments really started to dry up. And all that were left were cover assignments. And to be honest, I can't remember the last time somebody called me and asked me to do a interior project. They just all assume that I don't want to do them. So I've tried for years to do various interior projects, which I call them vanity projects.
Right.
When a publisher comes to you and says, hey, we've got this Captain America miniseries, it's 4 issues, do you want to draw it? That's an assignment.
Mm-hmm.
A vanity project is when a company comes to you and says, hey, we'd love to have you work for us, what would you like to do?
Right.
And that sort of stuff started for me with, I did, I think it was around 1996, I did a miniseries for Wildstorm called Gen 13 Ordinary Heroes.
Mm-hmm. Yes, looking at it right now. Go ahead.
And,
Gorgeous.
And, thank you. That was a vanity project because they said, we want you working for us. We know your reputation for being very slow, so you're going to have to we'll fly you out to La Jolla, California, and you're going to have to work actually at Wildstorm for the duration of the project, and we'll put you up in a furnished apartment. And I was like, oh, the horror. I'm a bourgeois white boy from New Jersey. The most romantic thing I've ever seen the sun set on is the Delaware River.
The smell of it.
We used to go fishing for eels. And which is literally like trying to catch lightning.
Right.
But they put me in an office 2 blocks from the Pacific Ocean where I could sit and watch the sunset every day, and it was it was heaven.
Yeah.
And I was only supposed to be there for 3 months, and I ended up being there for 10.
Okay.
But it was one of those things where they said, well, okay, they had another writer who was going to do it, and they said, hey, Adam, what story do you want to tell? And I was like, I don't know. Didn't you guys have a plan? They said, no, whatever you want to do with Gen 13, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
I was like, all right. So I said, well, how about a monster story? And they said, cool. What kind of monster? And I was like, well, what if the monster was like Gen 12? And they're like, okay, fine. And they said, the writer's really busy with like 10,000 other books, like Death Blow and other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, why don't you start like plotting it? And I was like, okay. So I started plotting it. And I got done plotting, and I said, guys, the only thing that's actually left is putting words in their mouths. Why don't you let me try scripting it, and if my dialogue sucks, you can bring in a script doctor to fix it. And they said, okay. And as it turns out, I would never insult professional writers by saying, oh yeah, I'm a writer too.
Right.
I'm a typist. But I think the one aspect of writing that I have a bit of a flair for is I've got a decent ear for dialogue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the thing is okay, when I wrote the dialogue, that was the best part of the thing. So when it got done, I was like, oh look, I wrote it. I wrote the whole thing, and they were like, okay, cool. Yeah, well, the writer was busy anyway. And I was like, all right.
Wow.
So it went from there to like a series of projects that got started but never finished.
Mm-hmm.
That were all vanity projects that people were like, hey, what do you want to do for us? And I was like, I guess I could do this. And, everybody's, always, oh man, Adam never gets these things done. I was like, well, I'd love to sit down with you with a beer or a drink or a Merlot,
Mm-hmm.
and explain to you how my Tomb Raider miniseries for Top Cow didn't happen, or how the reason why I didn't draw Superman Gen 13.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And these were forces beyond my control. Where I said, screw this shit. I'm walking away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need this shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's like here I am years later working on stuff, and it's all up to me.
Yeah.
So nobody ever actually asked me to draw stuff. Nobody ever comes up to me with nobody even says, hey, would you do an inventory issue of blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
They want they don't want to fill an issue by me. They want a sort of a book that they can
like an event kind of a
Right.
thing that they can,
And it makes sense
which
because you kind of paid your dues to the ranks in that regard. I mean, no one asks you to do some kind of inventory issue because it's not if Adam Hughes does something, they want it out there immediately to make sales.
Right.
Yeah,
You know?
and it's and that's still a lot of pressure on me.
Mhm.
It's kind of
Oh, yeah.
I can't just sit down and have fun drawing it. It's like, well, it doesn't. They can't even just tell the story. It's got to be like it's got to wow people, and it's like, oh crap. That's why I became a cover artist, and the cover artist pays the bills, and it allowed me the freedom to sort of perfect my style, because for the longest time I think I floundered around emulating my favorite artists for longer than I should have, looking for something, because I really don't enjoy my work all that much. I'm the last person I want to sit and look at their artwork. If everybody else likes it, great, that's fine. That keeps me in, like, cocaine and horrors. I'd rather be looking at my heroes. I'd rather be looking at my favorite artists. And being a cover artist, I was actually able to take control of the art. Like, I didn't have inkers anymore, and I didn't have colorists anymore.
Right.
I would do a finished cover start to back, and I'd hand it in, and I did everything on the cover except go up to Ronald's in Canada and push the green button to start the presses.
Right.
And I think that's where I actually started to develop my own style. And it's, because it's not just when you're penciling something for somebody else to ink, you pencil it differently than if you're inking it yourself. And if you're penciling and inking something that's meant for another person to color, there's a certain coloring book aspect going on, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that you have to do things that a stranger can look at, and maybe a stranger who you're not going to talk to and say, I want this to be a da-da-da shot.
Right.
A great example was, I remember working on May's Agency, and Mike Barr's script called for a nighttime scene. No, it called for a daytime scene. And so I drew the Lieutenant Bliss, the female cop,
right,
wearing sunglasses, and the colorist went in and colored it nighttime. And it's one of those things where it's like, ooh, gosh, couldn't you tell? Because didn't the sunglasses give it away?
Right.
You have to pencil and ink a certain way so that a colorist can go in and take the work and go, oh, I see what you're going for. I can color it. A lot of times when I'm working on a cover, I will decide, all right, am I going to do a particular aspect of this piece as part of the line art, or am I going to do it as part of the color? It's become not another stage in the assembly line. It's become another tool in my paint box.
Right.
So doing hundreds and hundreds of covers, start to finish. I've sort of nailed my style. And I think that's what people see me as a single illustration guy, which is why I get covers and lithograph assignments, and the storytelling. I have to remind people that I tell stories.
Right, and for all those people that are listening that don't know, you're actually one of the forerunners, if not the forerunner, for the changing lines into a color match. So.
I don't know about that, but I've certainly abused the privilege. It's like. John Dillinger wasn't the first criminal, but he was just very well known.
Yes, he was.
So, I do it a lot, and it's just to me, it's one of those things where you go, all right, well, we have this tool, and by that I mean the ability to transpose your line art and take it into color, which most people would use for separating foreground from background.
Right.
If you have a city in the background behind Batman, you knock Gotham City back to a color so that there seems to be a sense of atmosphere. Or if somebody's doing something that has energy powers or an explosion or something, just to give that impression of a tremendous amount of light, people will take the line art and knock it to a color. And I started to go, well, wait a minute, why can't we use that to help sell the fact that a blonde person's hair is very blonde, or if somebody's got a white costume, really knock all those lines out so that costume seems white. And nobody's slapped me on the wrist yet, so I guess I'll just continue to do it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, you have our approval. That's for sure.
Yes, that's for sure. Worked very well. So it does.
Adam, we got some folks on our message board who submitted some questions for you. A lot of cool guys who are artists and graphic designers and stuff who wanted to get some cues in and see what you had to say. These next three, and they're not difficult questions, I don't think, but these next three are from a guy named Atomic99, and he says, it was recently announced, or at least mentioned on the Yahoo group, that there will be a cover art book of your work by DC. And he wants to know what kind of input you may have in that, and will you be selecting any of the pieces for it?
I'm sure that for $40, DC will let me buy it.
Okay.
You know, we've been trying to get a book going for years and years and years and years at DC, and we've just encountered so much difficulty. And then we turn around one day, and there's an announcement that there's going to be a cover book. And Allison and I were like, huh, did you know about this? I didn't know about it. Yeah. And then we get like an email like a day later going, oh, yeah, we're doing a cover book, as if it's this amazing sort of like, okay, picture this, you know, like, like they're coming into the producer's office going, okay, JL, think about color film, you know, and you're like, oh yeah, we've been trying to do color film for 20 years. Yeah. I'm really glad that we're doing it. You know, people have always asked me, like, when are you going to do a coffee table book? It's difficult in a lot of instances to procure the rights from all the clients that you've worked from, and you know, we get all these differing stories from different people, but one of the things I've heard is that if you can publish other people's material in your book, one, if it's for educational purposes, and two, if it doesn't comprise more than 30% of the finished book. Okay. Well, that's fine, but considering the fact that I've been working for DC since 1989, and I would say that 85 to 90% of my output of my entire career has been for DC Comics, that would be a very thin coffee table book if I could only have 30% of my DC work in there.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, I'm hoping, you know, the book's scheduled for 2010. I'm hoping that they'll allow me a lot of input. I'm hoping we'll be able to use, you know, the designer that I want to use, which is my art director, the fabulous Mark Chiarello.
Okay. Cool.
You know, I would love it if Mark and I could design the book, and, you know, because he and I are friends, he's the guy that's been giving me all my work at DC since I started on the Wonder Woman covers. And we have a great rapport, so we come up with the best. I mean, the reason why my covers look as good as they do is because I work with Mark. Any other art director, you might be able to get away with one good assignment or two good assignments, but Mark's the guy that's gotten hundreds of covers out of me for DC Comics. And it's because we work great together. He knows how to crack the whip. He knows how to sort of rub my back and say, it's okay, pal, it's going to be all right. You know, he knows when to be a jerk and he knows when to be a friend. He's also a brilliant painter, so when he says to me, you need to change this and make it blue, I'll go, okay, I trust you.
Right.
Wow,
you know,
okay, cool.
You'll have so many people who will... I don't mind people who art direct and tell me to make changes as long as the changes are improvements.
Right.
I can't stand arbitrary changes by wannabe artists who simply want to leave their fingerprints on the work just to say that they did their job. That's counterproductive, and it also sucks all the energy out of me. You know, I always say that it's like people who come up and say, "Look, this is great, but you got to change it. I don't want this purple anymore because my mother wore purple, and I hate my mother." And you go, "But it's the Hulk. His pants have to be purple." You know? And you get this kind of stuff where you have these people, and I don't need these people. For me, drawing is like, you know, it's like taking a hill in the Korean War. It's all work. I don't need you fighting me.
Right.
I don't need my own guys fighting me on up the hill.
Right.
So, you know, Mark and I do great work together because Mark gets the best out of me. And so if Mark and I can work on the book, and I get to include a lot of like my sketches and my preliminaries, covers that got rejected, all sorts of stuff. It could be a nice fat coffee table book, which hopefully, you know, I love the production on these
the 52 book and the James Jean Fables covers book.
Yeah, you know, the Cover Girls book was gorgeous. You know, they just really do a nice job, and I would like to be a part of that. But you know, I joke though because I was like, well, Alex Ross got a mythology book. What can mine be called pornography? I want to use the same font. I want it to look just like Alex's book. You know, people at DC don't want to hear from me at that point.
Yeah, it'd be a bit of a hard sell at Barnes & Noble in Borders.
Thongs to remember,
right?
Like your sketchbook,
right? Which is mad cool.
Adam, Atomic 99 has another question. He wants to know, which run on a book are you the most proud of as far as your cover work goes?
It's got to be my Wonder Woman covers.
Okay.
The Catwoman covers, because the book ended, I didn't get to do everything that I wanted to do, and I look back over the covers that I did, and I go, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. But the Wonder Woman covers, I really got to explore and grow and do a lot of fun stuff. And I think that I was a substantially better artist by the time I was done the run. So it's got to be the Wonder Woman covers.
Okay. Let me ask you this about the Catwoman covers. You tell me if this is incorrect. It seemed as if towards the last, I don't know, half a dozen or dozen covers that you did on Catwoman, that you were going more designy and more graphic designy, a little less illustrative. Does that not seem right? Or
no, that's correct. I mean, and that was why I feel that I didn't get to finish what I had started on the covers.
Okay.
Because I have this strange notion that at least every other cover or so that I should do a cover that reflects the interior of the book.
Yeah.
And
wonder where that came from.
Yeah.
But I think that's incorrect. I remember doing a panel with a bunch of cover artists at a convention once.
Yeah.
And some of them were old school guys, and they were saying, "Oh, comic book covers today suck." You know, like they don't let you know what the inside's about, and rah rah rah, and all this sort of geezer nonsense.
Okay.
And I waited until they were done their rant, and I took my shoe off, and I banged it on the table, and I told them that I would bury him. To get the audience on my
Thank
side.
you, Mr. Khrushchev.
Hey, it's all about getting the audience to love you, and
Exactly.
but I pointed out that sort of mentality where the interior, the cover, it represents a panel from the inside, or really, it's the Flash standing on the cover. Like those old Julie Schwartz DC covers where you'd have Flash standing on the cover,
right,
pointing to the cover, going,
if you don't buy this, I'll die, or something.
Yeah, why is Green Arrow wearing a tutu? Open the comic and find out. Okay, that kind of stuff works great the way comics used to be sold, which was on a spin rack.
Right.
The reason why the logo of a comic book is in the upper third of the cover is because you'd have these spin racks where all you could see is the logo.
Mm-hmm.
And you pull the comic out, and you then start to thumb through it. Normally, if you got the comic in your hand, it's still free for you to thumb through it and see if you like it. So they would do these things on the cover that were like hooks. Nowadays, comics 99% of the time are sold what I call florist style. You walk into a comic shop, which is a boutique store, and the comics are normally laid out on shelves running the entire length of the store or in the back of the store, and you get to see the entire cover.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the function of a cover, in my opinion, is to get you to buy the comic.
Exactly.
It's not to tell a story. It's not to impart anything about the interior. The job of a comic book cover, or any cover, Rolling Stone, Playboy, Saturday Evening Post, the cover of a DVD, is to get you to buy the damn thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
A cover artist is, and I've said this before, a cover artist's job is the last line in advertising.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're the barkers that stand on the street going, "Step right inside."
Right. The MIBs of of comics.
Exactly, and we are allowed the luxury of being storytellers as well.
Mm-hmm.
But our main job is to get you to walk into that comic shop. When I'm the Wonder Woman cover artist, my job is to make you pick Wonder Woman before you would pick either Wolverine or Wonder Man.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it's about getting your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think comic book covers, you can do figurative stuff, you can do literal stuff, you can do stuff that relates to the story, you can do iconic stuff. It's just you got to get somebody to have both of their hands on the book.
Mm-hmm.
Because once they start flipping through the book, I punch, morning Sam, morning Ralph, I punch the time card, and I go home. Because then it's the job of the people doing the insides, whether it's me or another team, to get the people to commit to the purchase.
Mm-hmm.
So on the Catwoman covers, I would sit there and go, they would, Will Pfeiffer was doing these stories. He's doing an excellent job. I would get synopses of the stories. Sometimes I would get the full scripts. And my natural, urge was to do service to the story. And it wasn't until I got, a bunch into the covers that I grew some balls, and I said, these covers need to really just help sell this book.
Yeah.
And that's when I started to get a little more designy, and I didn't get to go nearly as far or as interesting as I wanted to go before the book ended.
Mm-hmm. I liked the direction that you were going in with them. As they went on, I was like, wow, this is really different.
Yeah,
and
Selena Kyle in the lineup.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there are often times where I would sit there and I'd go, all right, well, I can go anywhere I want with these covers. Where should I go? Sometimes I would go to my local comic shop and I would look at what comics are before and after Catwoman. I'd look at what kind of stuff they're doing on the covers to Captain America, and then I'd look at the covers that they're doing on whatever was alphabetically next. And if I noticed a trend, I could sit there and go, okay, I'll take my cue. I'll go in the other direction.
No, okay.
And because you can sort of make anything work, and if you're looking for sometimes a process of eliminations is as viable a creative process as any other. So if I looked at Captain America covers going, wow, they're doing a lot of red, white, and blue covers. It's like, okay, on Catwoman I'll do lots of orange and purple, just so that it'll stand out from across the room.
Yeah.
Now, giant knockers with tons of cleavage, that helps too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So if you can sit there, and your protagonist is an attractive woman,
wearing lycra nonetheless.
Yeah.
Yeah. That certainly doesn't hurt sales.
Not at
all. 99% of the time I get asked to draw female characters.
Yeah.
And it's my bear to cross. It's okay. I'm happy with it. I will go to my grave as a bimbo artist, and I'm fine with that.
Right.
So it's that's one of the things that helps you sell it. But you're at that point you're only selling to guys.
Yeah.
Guys or extremely curious lesbians. And part of my job, I always thought was like, well, I want to draw these beautiful women. One of my great art heroes, one of my great influences and inspirations is the late Dave Stevens.
Yes, sir.
And I was like, oh, I got to do that sort of like that pinup stuff. That's going to be awesome. And then I go, but you know what? I mean, it's possible to do this sort of glamorization of these characters without offending people, and I try to not offend people. I mean, feminists will be very bothered by the portrayal of women in comics. You have a bunch of female characters all tied up, and there's Japanese tentacle porn, and there's just it's just an oily mess. And
oily mess.
I've had a lot of people come up to me and go, wow, I'm really offended by the way women are portrayed in comics, but there's something about the way you do it that doesn't bother me, and I treat that as one of the highest compliments. Because people with an axe to grind, people with a lobby, people with a movement. A lot of times, it's basic human nature to look for things that fit into your targeting reticle. And when somebody who's looking for something to get mad about, like look at the they're not portraying these characters as normal women. I really take it as a big compliment when almost all of them come up to me and go, I like the way you portray women. It's there's something going on behind the eyes. There seems to be a spark of character going on, and I do firmly believe that men in comics are over idealized and glamorized just as much as women. I remember I did a poster for DC Comics back in the 20th century of it was like Catwoman crawling on a ledge, and then behind her was a poster of all the DC heroines, and she's like running her claws through it. And the poster had Wonder Woman and Black Canary and Supergirl and Hawkgirl and stuff like that. And I remember I was living in New Jersey at the time, so I would go up to DC twice a month. And I went up to look at the proofs of the poster, and this woman who worked at DC at the time, who was a friend of mine, and much like me, a normal person, nothing special about the way we look. And I was sitting there looking at the poster going, yeah, printed pretty good. And she came in and said, she goes, her only comment about the days of hard work that I produced that was now laying in front of us. She goes, Catwoman's waist is too thin. I mean, it's totally unrealistic. No woman's built like that. And it must have been a low blood sugar day. I must have been like really feeling crummy. I turned to her and said, well, I don't look like Superman either, but I don't go around bitching about it. And she just kind of like punched me and rolled her eyes. And we're still friends to this day, but it's true. I mean, I think that you could sit there and say that nobody's waist is as thin with boobs as big as Catwoman, but nobody's shoulders are as wide as Superman.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to get like hell for saying this, but what the heck, if the tenets of feminism are true, and that women are as equal as men in every area except giving birth,
right?
And I believe that too. It's part of one of the reasons why I work on Wonder Woman. Then women should be as they can be as tough as men. And if Madison Avenue's portrayal of men doesn't hurt guys, then I don't know. I firmly believe that women shouldn't let it hurt them.
Right.
It's like there's a lot that's said about the way women are portrayed in popular media, and it gives young girls poor self-image. I'm going, well, then why aren't Calvin Klein ads giving young boys, bad self-image issues as well? It's just ever since the dawn of time, ever since the first caveman wrapped some food in a leaf and packaging was invented, and he was trying to impress perhaps an attractive cave woman, he would wrap it in a nice looking leaf, not a crappy looking leaf. It's people like things presented in an eye pleasing package. And when you're selling the idea of people, superhuman people, heroic people, most people don't want to see normal-looking superheroes.
Right. They're not super anymore.
Yeah, and that's one way of doing things. If you're trying to sit there and say that, hey, anybody can be heroic, anybody can be super, that's the way you go. But I'm dealing with a lot of these classic, iconic characters, and Bruce Wayne should be devilishly handsome. Clark Kent should be, have a great Midwestern
profile.
Boy next door, all-American look. Yeah.
Boy next corn-fed, what are they feeding them in Kansas these days look. Wonder Woman should literally be the most beautiful woman to walk the face of the earth ever. Catwoman should just be the most dangerously attractive femme fatale you've ever seen. And it's just, I think that's the way to do it, and that's kind of what pays my bills.
Adam, let me play devil's advocate with you as far as that's concerned. Don't you think, to a certain extent, that there is a lot more pressure on women in terms of how they look and present themselves than men? Because more typically, men will be judged on what they've accomplished, and women will be more judged on how they look and how they make other men feel, and how attractive in some ways they are to other women as well.
It's true.
It's true. I mean that is a reality, but then again, that sort of, I think that, I don't know. I live in a cave. Maybe I don't know how it works in the real world. I shouldn't trust what the internet shows me.
It's true.
But to me, it's like, if you let somebody, define you by your looks, aren't you
part of the problem?
Aren't you part of the problem?
Yeah.
And granted, it's true. I mean, we all know that there's, for a lot of women, they're out there. There's that glass ceiling. Women can only advance as so far in a company or at a job where men can go further. And I think that should not exist. Regardless of their sex, it's the best person for the best job, and there shouldn't be any gender, race, religion.
None of those things should be taken as a
litmus test.
Yeah, exactly. With very few exceptions. I mean, guys should not allowed to be Hooters waitresses. I think that. I think that there, of course, there would be real exceptions to the rule, but there shouldn't be any barriers to what allows somebody to excel in life.
I don't know, Adam. I just have to interject there. I think Lou Ferrigno back in the day might have made has a pretty nice size of pretty nice pair of hooters. I'm just kidding. Sorry, man.
We've gone way off the rails with this one.
Sure, sure. You know what I do whenever a conversation goes off the rails, or like, somebody says something and there's just that awkward silence.
Right.
God bless the way things have gone. I just basically wait a beat and I go, so, black president, that's weird, huh?
Yeah.
And you can just totally start a brand new conversation,
Awkward. We actually started easing a little bit into some process stuff, which Dwight and I have a couple of questions to ask you as far as how you do what you do. You're talking about how your approach to a cover and what you feel like your job is, and how to make it effective. Mm-hmm. Tell us how did you start painting and digitally coloring your work, and the B part of that was Brian Stelfree's your old studio mate an influence on that? Because I know he's been painting for quite a while now. I don't know if you were prior, but.
Brian's been painting since the pre-Raphaelite period.
Okay. And it shows.
Well, when I got to, most people that paint or do color illustrations, they start doing that around the same time that they do their drawing. Mm-hmm. Meaning at that point in their life or their career. Mm-hmm. So their drawing skills and their painting skills kind of, sort of like the Kentucky Derby race down the track of life neck and neck. I had never done much color work at all. When I moved to Gaijin Studios, when I moved to Atlanta to become part of Gaijin Studios in 1992, I'm in a studio with Brian Stelfreeze, who is a brilliant painter. Mm-hmm. Brian has this amazing, I can teach you to paint in an afternoon thing. And you're not going to paint well, but at least you're going to understand the basic theories.
Okay.
And if you go to any convention that Brian's at, Brian's usually giving somebody a variation on that instruction, and it's a treat to watch.
Yes.
He's always got a crowd around him because he's just making it a lot of fun, and you walk away from it going, oh yeah, I think I can try some of that. Mm-hmm. So Brian walked me through the basics of painting, and because my drawing skills at that point were, a decade or two old, I encountered frustration left and right. I fought with paint at every step of the process. Mm-hmm. So every time I did a color piece, it was always very frustrating. And if you look at any of my actual painted pieces, I think the frustration and the difficulty shows. Now, when I went out to Wildstorm to work on Gen 13 for Jim Lee, I didn't have a car. I lived three or four blocks from Wildstorm. Mm-hmm. I'd draw all day, and I'd have nothing to do at night because La Jolla, California closes at 10 o'clock.
Really?
Okay. Oh, yeah. It's a ghost town after 10. So I would go hang out in Wildstorm Effects, which was the in-house coloring suite that Wildstorm had. Maybe they still have it. Mm-hmm. And several of the people that worked there taught me how to color on the computer. Mm. They taught me how to use Photoshop. At the time, it was Photoshop 3. Mm-hmm. I really was not computer savvy at all, so they were basically saying, well, this is what a mouse is. That's your monitor. Mm-hmm. And one of the people was Laura Martin, who was the most lauded and awarded colorist in comics.
Right.
Laura's one of the three people that taught me the basics of Photoshop. So when I came home from my 10 months at Wildstorm, I bought a computer that was strong enough to run Photoshop, and I started messing around with it myself.
Okay.
And it was like finally finding your soulmate or finding the perfect house or whatever. When I got into the digital media, I was like, I feel comfortable. I feel at home.
Right.
But much like when the airbrush was invented or discovered, or however the airbrush came about, most people used the airbrush as a shortcut to watercolor techniques. It's like you have to master watercolors. You have to master that wet-on-wet application of transparent water-based media to get that beautiful fade. Mm-hmm. People with an airbrush can do it, and you're done. Mm-hmm. Anybody who's learned anything in life knows that shortcuts don't help you out, because one of the things that separates, the Grand Master of the Jedi Knights from the generic Padawan is
Yes.
the years of experience that it takes to hone those skills changes you. And when you get to that point 20 years down the road where you have mastered, whatever the skill is, your decision-making process has been honed as well. Not only do you have the muscle memory in your hands to do it properly, not only do you have the skill set to accomplish it properly, but you also have an extremely honed decision-making process, and you are making the creative choices, or if you're a martial artist, the destructive choices of a master. And anything that involves creating a shortcut kind of ruins that, because you're basically giving somebody the ability to perform, the dim mak, or the whatever the most brutal, amazing thing of your art is, but they don't have the judgment and the common sense and the ability to use it properly. And for as Star Wars, oh my God, can open worms everywhere.
Right.
I'm the biggest Star Wars nut in the universe, and
Let's go there, sir.
Beat the shit out of anybody that argues that with me. But it's and for as sort of like clumsily and unpoetically, the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker was portrayed in the prequels. It's true. I mean, you sit there and you go, okay, the way a Jedi Knight is created is that, like, the Jedi go around and perform this weird, strange, Force, pap smear on babies, and and if your baby comes up like has a decent SAT score with the Force, the Jedi go, hey, sorry, eminent domain, we're taking your baby to the Jedi Temple, and you'll never see it again. Thank you for helping the galaxy.
Right, you can't stop us.
You can't stop us. Here's some turtle wax and a life supply of rice-a-roni. And and then, somebody spends their entire life learning about the Force, mastering the Force, and becoming somebody who can use the Force for good. You got Anakin Skywalker, who is so ridiculously talented that he is against everybody's better judgment. And let's face it, everything that is bad in the Star Wars, the 6 Star Wars movies, the television shows, the comics, can all be blamed on Qui-Gon Jinn.
Right, it's true.
It's all based on his rotten decision-making process. They sit there and say, okay, we're going to take this 9-year-old who is already forming his own personality. He's already independent.
Exactly.
He's already gifted. And we're going to try to corral this wild buck of a Jedi Knight. We're going to try to instill in him the discipline. And so what you end up with is somebody who is way too talented, and they don't have the years of experience to control that talent. And then at the end, he goes down the wrong path because he doesn't have the discipline to see, hey, the discipline and the experience, because discipline comes from experience. He doesn't have what it takes to sit there and make the correct decisions.
Right.
So yeah, you're right. It is a good example of to be able to say the airbrush, the computer, whatever, can be shortcuts to a level of artistic proficiency that you don't actually possess. What I found was that, I wasn't really looking at what other people were doing with computer colors back in the 90s and stuff. I said, well, let me just try to mess around with it on my own and try to come up with my own thing. And I sort of found a way to apply the computer coloring with Adobe Photoshop as its own tool, as opposed to a way to virtually achieve an analog effect. Like I would work before I started coloring my own stuff. I had a computer guy work on some covers for me at DC, and he said, "Oh, I can make it look like an oil painting." And I said, "Don't, because if I wanted it to look like an oil painting, I would learn how to paint with oils."
Okay.
Let's create our own new 21st century way of doing things.
And that you did, sir. And that you did.
Well, I'm still working on it. And there's a bunch of other guys out there that are doing the same thing, where they're going, all right, we're going to use this as its own storytelling medium, its own graphic medium, and that's what it should be used as. And so that's kind of the long story short, that's kind of the reason why I've glommed onto the computer. Is I don't feel like I'm fighting it the way I fought paints. I'm actually I'm actually comfortable enough with it that I can work on the real stuff, which is trying to tell stories, try to portray interesting characters, and try to convey ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime where you're doing something and you're actually paying attention to technique,
mm-hmm.
your mind is being distracted from the real task at hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's the answer to the question.
So, and as a follow-up question to that, is it true that when you first started using it, you were using a mouse, right? Do you still use a mouse, or are you using a Wacom tablet or a Cintiq or something akin to that?
I still use a mouse.
Wow. And you achieved that
Are you
level of
serious?
proficiency with a mouse? Oh my God, Adam!
But
I don't mean to be off color, but are you bullshitting? Oh my God!
No, but see, here's the thing. I have a gallery on DeviantArt.com, and I answer the mouse incredulity question literally once a day.
Right.
I don't use a mouse the way someone else uses a stylus.
Right.
So don't think that I'm like sitting there and I'm drawing with a mouse. I'm doing stuff. My coloring technique. I've told people if you already know how to use Photoshop,
mm-hmm.
I can teach you every trick I know in Photoshop in about 25 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I use a mouse. I use it very simply. My coloring technique is just based on making selections
mm-hmm.
and filling them in.
Okay.
So I really don't need the ability to draw with a stylus.
Right.
I know I need to figure out how to work on, but every time I try to use one, I was actually visiting Brian Bolland in England, and he does all of his stuff, including drawing, on a tablet. He pencils, inks, and colors everything. He has no original art anymore. And he said, yeah, try it out, give it a shot. So I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it took me so long to draw a Wonder Woman face that It's like, all right, I'm slow to begin with, and everybody's badgering me to say, oh, you got to use this, you got to use a stylus. And I'm going, great. You're asking me to go on hop onto a learning curve that's going to make me even slower. Right. Until I master it.
No, actually not at all. In my case, what I'm asking you is I'm celebrating the fact that you have the level of sensitivity to understand and be able to work the tools that you have and the way that you do them and blow everybody else. I mean, a lot of people are using whatever they have that's supposedly a better tool, and they're not getting the same results that you are. So,
right.
By all means, man, use what makes you happy and work it. You're doing it.
But, the only thing that I'm using that maybe somebody else isn't using, it's not like, oh, I've got the latest version of Photoshop, or, oh, I'm using a mouse, or what have you, is, when I got to Gaijin Studios and Brian Stelfreeze started to, say, hey, here's the basics of painting, he sort of opened the door for me to the world of color theory and painting technique.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm doing is using painting technique and color theory, hallowed by time and consecrated by usage, going back to the Flemish masters. All I'm using the same theories just with a new tool.
Okay.
That's all it is. That's all that's going on. People come up to me at conventions and say, "Oh my God, show me what you do. How can I learn how to color like you?" And I go, "Great, it's easy. Do you know how to use Photoshop?" They go, "Yes." I said, "Okay, good. I can show you what I do in 25 minutes, but you have to do something first." And they go, "What's that?" I go, "Go off and learn how to paint."
Right.
Come back to me in 5 to 7 years, depending on your proficiency level, and I will teach you everything I know in 25 minutes.
And furthermore, go back and learn how to draw, because the structure is ultimate
yes.
thing you got to work on first.
Yeah.
So.
It's you can't have one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. There's no real crazy trick. Anybody could use a mouse to color in Photoshop if you're using sort of the proper, time-honored techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the way it works, and I don't really even think about it. I color and I get it done, and I get enough work done that it pays the bills, so I'm not really worried about being faster. So if I ever use a Cintiq or whatever, it'll just be out of maybe that every artist gets to a point where they go, hey, I want to try something a little different.
Yeah, right, sheer boredom.
Just to shake things up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's funny, we had Phil Noto on the show, Adam, and he was telling us that when he first started working with digital coloring, he said you were very helpful, gave him like a little tutorial on how you do. I guess it's the 25-minute Adam Hughes.
Right.
Yeah.
Tutorial, right?
You said language isn't a thing here. Phil knows how to fucking paint.
Yes, he does.
Yes, he does.
Phil's brilliant. So, Phil's one of those guys where, you could teach him Photoshop or computer coloring in an afternoon, and it'll look like he's been coloring with computers his whole career.
Yes, yeah, he does an amazing job. Adam, certainly, as you mentioned and implied and intimated earlier, you're aware of your many strengths as an illustrator, and also I'm guessing, as you've implied and intimated earlier, that you're your own biggest critic. What areas of art and illustration do you feel like you still miss in? Like you look back at something and say, well, that's a little off, or man, that left foot is too big. I mean, where do you feel like, you still need to hone in and work on? What,
right? Because we don't see anything.
Yeah,
so.
we don't see a damn thing wrong. So
I personally think all my stuff really sucks. And I'm not saying that to be,
self-deprecating or
disingenuous. I'm not trying to be like, oh golly. I really look at my artwork and all I see is, okay, you guys look at it and go, that's a nice piece of artwork. I look at it and I see the picture in my head, and the picture in my head could actually bring eyesight to the blind and cure 6 kinds of cancer. And I couldn't get it on the fucking page. And I sit there and I go, God, I had such better ideas, and I couldn't pull them off, whether it was time or whether it was just I'm not proficient enough, or you get in there and you lose track of what your goal was. You lose sight of your goal. You roll up your sleeves, you get in there, you're slopping the pixels around, you're messing with the paint, you're doing whatever, and you walk back and you go, oh crap, I forgot I wanted to do this one subtle. And I've had a bunch of pieces where I'll finish it and I'll go, that looks way too over-rendered. I'll look at finish some piece. I mean, I think I'm proficient. I think I do a good job. I know that right off the bat, I draw heads too big. Every time I draw something, I draw it, and I normally draw like in a sketchbook or on scratch paper or something like that, and then I transfer it to the artboard because I make so many mistakes when I'm drawing. I change my mind so many times that by the time I get to the point where I can ink it, I've gouged these like Martian canals into my artboard, which render the pages uninkable.
Right.
So I've just basically learned, okay, look, do all my art somewhere else, transfer it with a light box or an autograph or whatever, and 9 times out of 10 I'll finish a drawing, and when I transfer it I'm like, okay, I got to make the head 5% smaller. I draw these giant melon heads because I have a giant melon head.
Come on, man. Don't they say in art the thing which you draw the biggest is the thing that you have the most interest in? I mean, so apparently.
Well, no, the boobies then are.
Oh well.
No, I just do that because I wasn't breastfed enough as a child. Yeah. No, it's just what you do, and I do everything bad with moments of brilliance. My biggest problem is consistency. I can be the most amazing artist that I will even amaze even myself. Like, I'll sit there and go, wow, I can't believe I just drew that. That looks so stinking cool.
Thank you. Cool.
I will get up the next day, and I cannot do the same thing to save my life. And it's something I've been fighting with in my whole life. Whether it's art, anything else, it's just like one night on Halo 3, I am just the balls.
Awesome.
I can kill with harsh language. I am so good. And the next night, I'm dying every 3 steps. I'm actually killing myself. I figured out the button combo to actually commit suicide. And I'm like, 24 hours ago, I was a diva, and now I'm a retard.
Yeah.
So it's like that with me all the time, and consequently, I have to do all these things when I'm working to try to not let people see that. And it's really, I mean, it's one thing from, you look at my Catwoman covers, you look at my Wonder Woman covers, you go, yeah, there were some good ones, there were some not so good ones, there were some nice ones, some not nice ones. When you're doing interior work, you can't have that, like, okay, panel 1 is gorgeous, panel 2 sucks, panel 3 is okay, hey, panel 4 is good again. That's just going to be that's going to draw you right out of the story.
You don't think that comes off as style in a way where there's this slight inconsistency?
Right.
And then people say, okay, well, he's freaking it. He's not,
Well, if you're a very good bullshit artist.
Okay.
And my mother was literally the Yoda of bullshit artists. And I've learned that basically if you mess up, the trick to messing up is to make it look like you planned it.
Right.
And that's what I do. And a lot of times when I'm unhappy with a cover, it's because I screwed up something fierce.
Okay.
And I think that my best skill as an illustrator is I have the ability to paint myself out of corners that I found myself in.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a long time ago, and I really envy these guys that seem to be in total control. Guys like Alex Ross, guys like Travis Charest, they seem to like never struggle, and they know they get exactly what they're going for.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't do that. So I learned a long time ago not to fight the artwork.
Mm.
I always liken it to a piece of artwork as a child that you've given birth to.
Mm-hmm.
And as that child starts to grow and progress, meaning when you go from the layout stage to actually drawing it, you could sit there and say, I want my child to be a lawyer. I want my child to grow up to be a doctor. And the child's like, no, I want to sell crack. And you can fight. Well, that's not a good example. I want to grow up in something else positive. So that's a bad example.
Let's stay with the crack analogy. I like that.
No, I suffer from chronic aphorism poisoning, and I end up with bad metaphors. Let's say your child wants to grow up and do something that you don't want it to do. You can fight the child, and there will be tension, and you'll be pulling the child away from what it wants to be, so that it's either going to end up doing what you want to do and not being very good at it and unhappy, or it will end up doing what it wants to do, but it won't be as great as it could have been because you actually were a hindrance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's how I look at my artwork. I'll sit there and have the best of intentions, and I go, I'm making a lawyer, I'm making a doctor. Oh my goodness, and then as it starts to progress, I'm going, this wants to play hockey for a living. The best thing you can do as a parent, the best thing you can do as an artist is go, you know what? I love this. I'm going to encourage it. So as long as it is happy, I'll be happy too.
Mm.
So I think that my best skill as an artist is that I can tell when something wants to be, when a piece of art wants to be something different than what I want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, fine.
Mm-hmm.
If this is what you want, I will help you do this.
Mm.
And then I basically do whatever I can to make it go in that direction.
Okay.
And I think that's why I've had more successful covers than bad ones.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that's interesting. Adam Hughes says there's some stinkers in there and there's some good ones in there.
Yeah.
I'm
to
at a loss, bro. I don't see any stinkers.
Man.
Some's better than others, but they ain't no stinkers.
But like the prophet, like Khalil Gibran says, their children are not your children. They come through you, but they are not of you. So your artwork goes, you just put it down and let it rock, and that's what you do, sir. Very well.
Yeah.
That's just, I think that works in every facet of life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, sort of Zen philosophy. You sort of like, a tree that stands there solid is going to get blown over in a hurricane, but a reed that knows how to bend with the wind will remain standing alive when the storm has passed.
Yes.
There we go.
May the force be with you always, Adam Hughes.
That's right. You know what I always loved as a kid? I mean, I don't know how old you cats are, but I was old enough that, like, when Star Wars came out, I was old enough to hang out in arcades without, like, parental supervision.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And the first Star Wars video game was that cool vector graphics Star Wars game where you flew around, you attacked the Death Star.
Yeah, man.
I always thought it was really, really funny that when you put a game cost $0.25 to play, but you could put multiple quarters in. If you put $0.25 in, the game acknowledged your insertion of 25 cents by you would hear this sort of really digitized MIDI version of Ben Kenobi going, "The Force will be with you." Right. And when you put your second quarter in, he said, "Always." Right. like one of those doormen that kind of stand there with their hand out after you've tipped them going, yeah,
I'm going to need a little more.
I was like, okay, the Force will be with you always if you pony up twice as much.
That's hilarious. I don't remember that, but I definitely want to go back and find that out. That's hilarious.
A couple of quick style questions, if we can, Adam. I have it in my notes. Is style and finesse from our message board, guys. Again, one is a guy named Mark California. The other is a guy named Jeremy. Mark California asks, has drawing fabulous babes become boring for you now, or so commonplace that you get off artistically on some unrelated subject? And if so, what is that subject?
Oh, that's a good question. The further you get away from puberty, the less sort of enamored you are with like drawing the naughty bits.
Right.
I will, and I've always joked that, I'll spend 15 minutes drawing the breast of a character, and then I'll spend 3 days drawing the background behind them, and people will come up and go, nice titters. And,
right.
and I'm like, man, I just did a Power Girl cover for the new Power Girl miniseries coming out from Jimmy Palmiotti and Amanda Connor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Power Girl pulling, doing the Superman thing. She's pulling her shirt open, this looks like a job for Power Girl. And, her chest symbol isn't a bat or a stylized S or a set of golden W's. It's a porthole that shows off her boobs.
Yes, it is.
And I thought, well, that's just screaming for the classic Clark Kent shot. And, took me 15, 20 minutes to draw her boobs. But, like, the buildings behind her in three-point perspective, it's like there's obviously a fire going on behind the reader. She's facing you and looking up at it, and there's smoke coming over your head, and she's surrounded by firemen and policemen and reporters, and they're all in various stages of like, why is this woman taking her clothes off? And all the firefighters and the policemen are all like, oh, yeah, And there's this one female reporter standing there with a microphone kind of like, bitch.
Right. Perturbed.
And, I took the time to draw Power Girl's boobs as big as they're supposed to be. But I spent all my time and love making sure that the fire trucks looked right. I made sure that I drew the
foreshortening perspective and
there are certain things. After a while, you do, I imagine this is. It must be like being a gynecologist or something. After a while, you're just like, okay, it's all grommets and O-rings.
Right.
A gynecologist still has to go home and basically, spend some quality time with his wife, and he
right.
can't go, honey, I am so tired of looking at junk. Could you please put it away? I just want to read the paper. But I remember there was this years ago. There was this web series, one of those first sort of early fetal attempts at a like a web-only television show.
Mm-hmm.
And it was I forget the name of it. It was about a guy who worked in the porn industry, but he wasn't an actor. But he was one of those guys that just like just a regular guy. He's got a wife at home, but he goes to work every day, punches the clock, and he has to boil dildos, or he has to, he just has to do all this mundane stuff. But in the sex industry, and then he has to go home. And I remember the one I literally soiled myself laughing so hard. He comes home from a day at work, and his wife wants to have sex, and he's just not interested. He's like, honey, I just want to go to bed. I'm tired. I'm not even interested. I watch people screwing for 10 hours today. And they turn the lights off, and you just hear this bzzz. and he says, what are you doing? And she says in an angry voice, I'm masturbating at you. And I always thought that, that's kind of what it's like. I mean, after a while, you can sit there and you can become inured to it. You can become desensitized to it. But it's I still, if I see my girlfriend Allison is an artist as well, and she loves doing pinup art. Mm-hmm. We'll see a pretty girl at the park or on television, and we'll go, "Oh man, cool! She'd make a cool hawk girl, wouldn't she? Yeah, she'd be neat. Or check her out. She's built like Power Girl, So you don't. Yeah, you become desensitized to it on the, sort of oh my God, I'm drawing naughty girls.
Right.
And it becomes something that appeals to you the same way you could look at, and it's, again, terrible to say things like this, but the way you look at a sunset, or the way you look at the way the light hits a tree at sunset, and
right.
you mark it in your brain. I will admit that a lot of times when I see in real life a beautiful woman on television or out and about in the real world, I will first make a mental note, I got to use that in a drawing. The way that looks, the way she's put together, I've got to use that. And then when my brain punches out, I go, oh yeah, she's hot.
Right.
So it's actually taken a back seat to the artistic priorities.
Interesting.
But even on covers or interior stuff, yeah, if I'm drawing a beautiful woman, that's one thing. But I love pulling off the thing that really just kind of gets the little jangle of nerves at the base of your skull going is when I pull off a character thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you go, okay, yeah, I've drawn a pretty girl, but I've drawn a pretty girl, and you can tell what she's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's either really funny or really ironic. You mentioned the Catwoman mugshot cover a little while ago, and the editorial brief for that issue was Catwoman returns to her life of crime, and she's not happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, geez, how do we do that? And it actually was Allison's idea. Allison said, well, what about a mugshot? And I went, oh, that's awesome. What a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, well, how do we show that she's unhappy? It's like, well, she should look just really like they pulled her in off of the rainy streets. They just arrested her. They threw her in there, and she's still like got mascara running down her face, and bottom lip is like, like she's just not having a good night. And that's the sort of thing. I mean, yeah, she's got acres of cleavage in that shot, but that wasn't the fun part of that piece. The fun part about that piece was like doing the bloodshot eyes with the runny mascara.
Mm-hmm.
And the wet hair that says this person hasn't even had the chance to dry off before they booked her.
And that's one of the strengths of your work, Adam. To that point, is that you do emotive works real well. You can always tell when someone's joking, when they're having a good time, when they're angry or frustrated. It all comes off. And
that's one of the things that I really like about your convention sketches too, dude. You can find them online all over the place. Well, there'll be a narrative, within the sketch,
right?
And it's usually a humorous one.
Well, it's funny because I think I get to do more of the funny stuff in those convention sketches than I get to do in the covers.
Yes.
Also because I can be a little more blue in the con sketches. I can go a little more PG-13 than I can on a comic book cover. But yeah, I think a sexy girl is good. I think a sexy girl being funny is great, or a sexy girl caught in an ironic moment. Is hysterical, and so to answer that person's question, I think that would have supplanted the oh golly, I'm drawing boobs.
Right.
The 2% more mature Adam is jazzed by pulling off a fantastic character thing.
That's pretty cool.
Adam, Jeremy's the other guy who posted a question, and he wants to know, are there, and this is actually a good question, I didn't even think about this, but he says, are there any artists whose work you've been drawn to that you would not consider to be a direct influence on your own style? And if so, what are the elements in their work that attracts you?
Yeah, I guess that is a good question, because we have a tendency to emulate our heroes, when you're learning from them. I mean, one of my greatest influences is Steve Rude, who co-created Nexus, which is like the book that saved me from being a very generic book-a-month Marvel artist, which is not to put that down. I don't do my best work at doing a page a day. It would be passable, but we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation because you wouldn't find my stuff interesting enough to talk about.
Okay.
And I was basically on my way to being a very poor man's John Byrne clone. When I was a teenager, I was like, I'm going to draw a page a day. I'm going to do 5 pages a day. I'm going to be like Jack Kirby,
Okay.
And
the Kirby barrier.
Guys like John Byrne and Jack Kirby can draw great and draw fast. I do not have what it takes to do both. It's like you either get it fast or you get it good. I can't do both. I've tried, and it sucks.
Right.
So when I discovered Nexus and Steve Rude's artwork, I was like, wow, this is amazing. The way he draws Nexus, it's so different than other superheroes. And another artist turned to me and said, just over his shoulder, said he's classically trained. And I go, what does that mean? This is like 1985, 1986. And I go, what's that mean? He goes, well, it means he didn't look at comics to learn how to draw. He studied real people. And I went, oh? And it saved me, because that's when I started to go, okay, there's more. You can bring more to comics than everything you learned and regurgitated from the previous generation of comics. You can learn to love comics, you can learn the techniques of comics, but then go out in the real world and gather your own set of influences and stimuli, and then bring it back to the table and go, okay, here's what I'm going to bring to comics now. And so I think Steve Rude would be a big example, because I don't think I try to draw like Steve, but everything about Steve, bringing his love of classic American illustration is guys like Andrew Loomis,
John Singer Sargent.
Yeah, you can look at those guys and bring their ideals with you to your comics work without actually ripping off their aesthetics and bringing them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Travis Charest is another guy. I mean, I would love to do stuff the way he does it, but I know I wouldn't be good at it. So I just try to get that sense of Travis's stuff is so solid. And I don't mean solid, though. He's a solid artist. I mean, his stuff looks like you could reach out and touch it.
Yes,
it does.
Yes, it does.
His tech looks like you could reach out there and fiddle with the knobs and unplug the wires.
Yeah.
Everything he does has such a concrete weight without being photorealistic.
Yeah.
That is another thing. Norman Rockwell is one of my outside of comics influences, where here's a guy who would paint in what many people would call a very photorealistic style, but he knew how to squash and stretch and exaggerate for comedy. He also knew how to tell a story with a single image.
Yes.
And so yeah, guys like that. Even Dave Stevens, who the guy who taught me to ink with a brush and got me to stop inking with pens. And
wow.
I don't try to draw like Dave. I'm not in love with 1930s through the 1950s pinup art the way Dave is, even though I do love it. And Dave turned me on to guys like Gil Elfgren and George Petty.
Yeah.
But that sort of, gosh, aren't beautiful women great? Let's celebrate that with artwork. That's what I get from Dave. Now granted, there are all sorts of nuts and bolt things. So, I think that the stuff that I rip off from my favorite artist the most is inking tricks. Because I would over ink a piece just because I'm neurotic, and I look at all my favorite artists who are brilliant inkers, and I study their work and go, aha, that is their solution for this type of fabric turning away from the light. And I'll sort of learn from them and take my cue there. I think that's the one place where I look at my favorite artists and go, I'm going to borrow that. Hope they don't mind.
Is Kevin Nolan an influence on your inking style? Because I do see similarities.
Oh my God, he's like one of my heroes.
He's just the best.
He is.
I just wanted Kevin Nolan's name to come up again.
One more time.
He is so stinking amazing,
yes.
And I was so lucky. I actually got to have a couple pieces inked by him, and I wished he had done more because I want to be, I want to be changed by. I want my stuff to be turned.
You want to be Nolanized. You want to be Nolanized,
right?
At Gaijin we used to call that being anolanated.
Yes.
And he wouldn't do it to me. He would stick to my pencils, and I'd be like, "Stop it! Come on, change it!" But yeah, his graphic solutions for the pen and ink medium are so perfect.
They are very good.
I would just, and I have to fight to stop, to not use it all the time.
He's just awesome.
That's going to do it for part one with Adam. We thank him for coming on the show and making time for us, and we thank you for listening in. Part two should be up within the week, and it was a lot of fun as well. Do tune in. If you like this podcast, please tell someone about it and let them know they can stop by our blog anytime at SiDEBARNation.com. From the main page, you can leave a comment, send an email, jump in on our message board, or peruse our back episodes located in the Barchives. And if you're so inclined, you can go to iTunes and leave us an iTunes music review. 5 stars would be like Adam's Power Girl come to life. Here's our announcer.
Well, that concludes another edition of Sidebar. I'm your announcer, Kay McFarland. Sidebar is a podcast on the subjects of comic books, art, and popular culture, created and co-hosted by Dwight Clark and Swain Hunt. Any questions, comments, or suggestions for this show, give us a shout at sidebarnation@gmail.com. That's sidebarnation@gmail.com. And you can also subscribe to the show for free at iTunes, Podcast Pickle, Digital Podcasts, and all the other podcatcher sites.